Good evening, friends. Tonight, we'll drift into the warm, sun-soaked world of ancient Egypt, where the Nile flows gently and time moves like honey in the desert heat. Dim your lights, settle under your blanket, and let your breathing slow as we journey back over 4,000 years to walk alongside ordinary people living extraordinary lives along the greatest river in the world. If this calm journey helps you unwind tonight, tap like and subscribe only if it feels right. For now, simply close your eyes and let the soft whisper of ancient winds carry you away. Let me tell you about Khemwaset, a farmer whose calloused hands knew every season the Nile had to offer. Picture him now, stirring as the first pale light touches the eastern horizon. Around 2500 BCE, during the Old Kingdom, the air is cool against his skin, that blessed reprieve before Ra begins his daily journey across the heavens. Khemwaset's home sits like a small fortress of mud brick, its walls thick enough to keep the day's heat at bay. The floor beneath his reed mat is packed earth, worn smooth by generations of bare feet. Can you hear it? The gentle rustle as he shifts, the soft whisper of linen against skin. His wife, Nefertiti, the famous queen, mind you, but a farmer's wife who shares that beautiful name, meaning the beautiful one has come, sleeps beside him, her breathing steady as the Nile's current. Outside, the village awakens with the slow, measured rhythm of people who've learned to move with the river's pulse rather than against it. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster calls, though not quite the cock-a-doodle-doo you might expect. Egyptian roosters had their own dialect, their cries mixing with the gentle lowing of cattle and the soft splash of early fishermen pushing their papyrus boats into the water. Khemwaset rises, his joints protesting slightly. Life expectancy hovered around 35 years back then, so at 28, he's already considered middle-aged. But there's a contentment in his movements, a man who knows his place in the cosmic order. He pads to the small shrine in the corner of his home, just a simple niche in the wall where a small statue of Sobek, the crocodile god who protects fishermen and farmers alike, keeps watch. The morning prayer is whispered, not sung. Grant us your protection, great Sobek. Let the flood be generous but not devastating. Let our crops grow tall and our family remain whole. His words dissolve into the cool air like incense, carrying hopes as old as civilization itself. Water for washing comes from a large pottery jar, its surface beaded with moisture that catches the growing light like tiny diamonds. The water is cool-blessed, cool-drawn yesterday evening from the Nile after the day's heat had begun to fade. Khemwaset cups it in his palms, splashing his face, letting the liquid run down his neck and chest. It's a luxury, really, this morning wash. Many of his neighbors make do with less. Breakfast, when it comes, is simple but nourishing. Nefertiti has awakened now, moving with the quiet efficiency of a woman who's mastered the art of starting each day without wasting motion. She tends the small fire-just embers, really, banked carefully from the night before and coaxed back to life with dried grasses and bits of precious wood brought from a priver. Trade, the bread she bakes is nothing like what you know today. Imagine a dense, chewy flatbread with the texture of a thick tortilla, but the hardiness of whole grain. It's made from emmer wheat, an ancient variety that tastes nuttier, more complex than modern wheat. The grinding was done yesterday by the women of the village, working together as the sun climbed high, their stone corns creating a rhythm that echoed across the settlement. Slide, thump, slide like a meditation made audible. Kimwaset tears off a piece, dipping it into a small bowl of honey that glows golden in the firelight. The honey tastes of flowers you've never smelled, blue lotus and papyrus blossoms, desert blooms that thrive in the narrow green corridor along the Nile. It's sweet, yes, but with an underlying earthiness that speaks of sun-baked clay and river mud. There's beer, too, of course. The Egyptians were perhaps history's greatest beer enthusiasts, and even children drank the mild, nourishing brew that was safer than water and filled with nutrients their growing bodies craved. This morning's portion is thick enough to be food and drink combined, barley and emmer, fermented with dates, creating something like a liquid bread that fizzes gently on the tongue as Kamwaset prepares for his day's work. He wraps a simple linen kilt around his waist. The fabric is rougher than you might imagine, hand-woven and sturdy, rather than the gossamer fine royal linen that graces museum displays. It's been dyed with ochre to a warm reddish brown, the color of the good earth that floods each year when Happy, the god of the Nile's inundation, opens his generous arms. His tools wait by the door, a wooden hoe worn smooth by years of use, its blade still sharp enough to bite into sun-hardened earth, a bronze sickle that catches the light like a crescent moon, and a carrying basket woven from palm fronds. Its weave so tight it can hold grain without losing a single kernel. The sun climbs higher now, painting the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold that would make any modern artist weep with envy. The air begins to warm, carrying scents that transport you across millennia. Fresh bread baking in outdoor ovens, the green smell of the river, the dusty sweetness of grain stores, and somewhere, faintly, the exotic perfume of frankincense drifting from a distant temple. Kamwaset steps outside, and the village spreads before him like a scene from humanity's earliest dreams. Mud brick houses clustered together for protection and companionship, their flat roofs already hosting the daily activities of women and children. Some tend small gardens of onions and garlic, others work at looms, their wooden frames clicking softly as thread becomes fabric, becomes clothing, becomes comfort against the desert's harsh embrace. Children dart between the houses like quicksilver fish, their laughter bright as brass bells in the morning air. They're naked, as children often were in this climate, their skin already bronzing under Ra's attention. One little girl, perhaps 6 years old, carries a doll made of rags and clay, its painted face worn smooth by loving hands. A boy slightly older practices with a wooden sword, preparing for the day he might serve in Pharaoh's army, or perhaps just dreaming of adventures beyond the village walls. The path to the fields winds through date palms whose fronds whisper secrets in the morning breeze. These trees are ancient even by Egyptian standards, some of them planted by Kamwaset's great-grandfather, their roots drinking deep from the water table, fed by the eternal Nile. The dates they produce are like nature's candy, intensely sweet, with a texture that's both chewy and melting, providing quick energy for workers who'll labor under the increasingly demanding sun. Other farmers join Kamwaset as he walks, their greetings warm but economical. May Ra smile upon your work today. Brother, may your fields drink deep from Happi's blessing. These aren't just pleasantries, they're genuine wishes for prosperity and survival in a world where the difference between a good harvest and a poor one could mean the difference between comfort and hunger, between staying in the village and joining the ranks of workers, building the pharaohs' eternal monuments. The fields themselves stretch like a green miracle between the river and the desert, their boundaries marked not by fences but by ancient knowledge passed down through generations. This plot belongs to Kamwaset's family, that one to his neighbor Amenhotep, and over there, the larger holding that belongs to the Temple of Ptah. The system works through cooperation rather than competition. When the flood comes, it lifts all boats equally, and when drought threatens, everyone suffers together. Today's work begins with checking the irrigation channels, narrow ditches that carry the Nile's life-giving water to every corner of cultivated land. The channels are marvels of ancient engineering, sloped just enough to keep water moving, but not so steep that it rushes away too quickly. Kamwaset walks along his section, clearing debris with his hoe, reinforcing banks with fresh mud, ensuring that when the time comes to flood his fields, the water will flow exactly where it's needed. The soil in his hands feels alive, dark and slightly cool despite the warming air. This is the gift of the Nile, renewed every year when the river rises and deposits its cargo of fertile silt across the floodplain. Farmers call it the Black Land, Chemotan. It's so different from the sterile sand just a few hundred yards away that it feels like stepping between two different worlds. As morning dissolves into the heat of midday, Kamwaset's thoughts turn to the coming flood season. It's still months away, but a farmer's mind is always cycling through the seasons, planning, hoping, preparing for the cosmic dance between river and land that makes civilization possible. Will this year's flood be perfect high enough to cover all the fields, but not so high that it washes away houses and granaries? Will it come at the right time, after the harvest is gathered, but before the planting season begins? These are the thoughts that occupy him as he works, his movements falling into the ancient rhythm of cultivation that connects him not just to his own ancestors, but to every farmer who's ever coaxed life from soil. Anywhere in the world, across all of human history, the sun climbs higher, the shadows grow shorter, and the great wheel of Egyptian life turns another notch toward whatever destiny the gods have written in the stars. The afternoon heat presses down on the village like a gentle, insistent hand, and life reorganizes itself around the sun's relentless attention. Picture Anku now, the village potter, as she works in the blessed shade of her workshop, three-walled structure that opens to the north, catching whatever breeze might wander inland from the great river. Her hands stained permanently with clay the color of dried dates, shaped vessels with the same unconscious grace that birds use to build their nests. Anku learned her craft from her mother, who learned from her mother before her, in an unbroken chain stretching back to the very first Egyptian who discovered that Nile mud, when shaped and fired, could hold water, store grain, and serve as canvas for humanity's earliest artistic expressions. Today, around 2400 BCE, she works on storage jars, great, round-bellied vessels that will hold oil pressed from olives grown in temple groves. or wine fermented from grapes that flourish in the delta's rich soil. The clay speaks to her fingers, yielding and responsive as a lover's touch. Can you feel it? The cool, smooth texture as she draws it up from the potter's wheel. The satisfying resistance as walls grow thin and tall. The moment when clay transforms from mere earth into something useful, beautiful, eternal. Her wheel spins with the steady rhythm of her foot against the treadle thump, whoosh, thump, whoosha sound that's become so much a part of her being that she dreams in that rhythm, wakes to its ghost echoing in her bones. The workshop smells of earth and water, with undertones of the dung fuel that feeds her kiln and the sweet oils she sometimes adds to her finest work. Wooden tools hang from pegs driven into the mud brick walls, smoothing stones polished to glass-like perfection. Curved scrapers made from gourds, and her favorite tool, a simple wooden rib carved by her grandfather, its surface worn velvet smooth by 3 generations of loving use taught around her. The village has settled into its midday rhythm. Those who can afford to rest do so, retreating to the coolest corners of their homes to wait out the sun's most aggressive hours. But life doesn't stop, just moves more slowly, more thoughtfully, with the measured patience of people who've learned to work with their environment rather than against it. Children seek shade wherever they can find it, clustering under awnings or in the narrow spaces between houses where shadows linger longest. Their games are quieter now, less running and shouting, more storytelling and gentle play. A group of girls practices the ancient game of scenic, moving ebony and ivory pieces across a board carved into a flat stone. Their young faces serious with concentration as they navigate the symbolic journey through the afterlife that the game represents. Boys have discovered a different entertainment. They're trying to catch the small lizards that dart across the sun-heated walls, their movements quick as thoughts. These little creatures, no longer than a child's finger, bask in heat that would be unbearable to human skin, their tiny hearts beating fast as hummingbirds. The children admire their speed, their fearlessness, the way they seem to dance with the very element that drives everyone else to seek shelter. In the house nearest to Anku's workshop, old Seneb, the scribe, sits cross-legged on a reed mat, a palette of red and black ink beside him as he practices his letters on a piece of limestone. At 72, he's achieved an age that marks him as blessed by the gods, and his knowledge of writing makes him one of the village's most valued citizens. Today he's copying a prayer for the harvest, his reed pen moving across the stone with the fluid grace of a master craftsman. The hieroglyphs flow from his pen like living things, a water bird here, a loaf of bread there. The ancient symbols that transform speech into something visible, permanent. Writing is still new enough to feel like sorcery, even to those who practice it daily. Each symbol carries not just meaning but power, the ability to preserve words and thoughts beyond the lifespan of the voice that first spoke them. Seneb pauses occasionally to dip his pen in water, then touch it to the cake of black pigment made from soot and gum Arabic. The red ink, reserved for important passages and corrections, glows like fresh blood in the indirect light. His handwriting is beautiful leech hieroglyph, perfectly proportioned, positioned with the aesthetic sense that makes Egyptian art immediately recognizable, even 4,000 years later. The afternoon air carries sounds that paint a picture of village life in its quieter hours. The gentle splash of someone drawing water from the communal well. The soft conversation of women grinding grain in the shade of a sycamore tree. The rhythmic thump of Anku's potter's wheel, and somewhere, barely audible, the sound of someone playing a simple wooden flute, notes that rise and fall like sighs, like prayers. Like the breathing of the earth itself, a merchant appears on the village's main path, his donkey loaded with goods from a priver trading posts. The animal's hooves raise small puffs of dust that glitter in the slanted sunlight, and the merchant himself moves with the unhurried pace of someone who's learned that arriving 5 minutes earlier isn't worth the cost in sweat and exhaustion. His cargo includes things the village can't make for itself: copper tools forged in workshops near the delta, lapis lazuli beads that carry the color of night sky, and rolls of the finest linen, bleached white as moonlight. But even commerce moves slowly in the afternoon heat. Negotiations will happen in the shade, with plenty of time for examining goods, discussing prices, and sharing news from other settlements along the river. Trade in ancient Egypt isn't just about exchanging goods, it's about exchanging stories, connecting isolated communities into something larger than themselves, weaving the threads that bind civilization together. Anku looks up from her work as the merchant passes, noting the fine ceramic vessels tied securely to his donkey's pack. Competition, perhaps, but also inspiration. She's seen the work of potters from Memphis and Thebes, noticed the subtle differences in style and technique that mark regional traditions. Each workshop has its secrets, its particular way of preparing clay or achieving certain glazes, and part of being a craftsman is learning to adapt and evolve while maintaining the essential qualities that make your work recognizably your own. The clay vessel growing under her hands will outlast almost everything else in the village. Long after the mud brick houses crumble back into the earth they came from, after the wooden tools rot away and the linen clothing dissolves into threads and finally into nothing, her pottery will remain. Archaeologists will find pieces of it thousands of years from now, holding fragments of ancient fingerprints, bearing witness to the skill and creativity of a woman whose name history will never record, but whose art speaks across millennia. She shapes the rim now, drawing it slightly outward to create a pouring spout, her thumbs smoothing away the ridges left by the wheel's rotation. The clay has reached the perfect stage, firm enough to hold its shape, but still responsive to gentle pressure. Too wet, and it will collapse. Too dry, and it will crack. Like so many things in life, pottery is about timing, about recognizing the exact moment when conditions align for creation. The afternoon light, streaming through the workshop's opening, catches the vessel's surface, highlighting its curves and revealing the subtle spiral patterns left by the wheel's motion. In a few hours, when the heat begins to fade, Anku will cover her work with damp cloths and begin preparing for tomorrow's tasks. The vessels she's completed today will dry slowly over the next several days, then wait their turn in the kiln that glows like a small sun behind the workshop, transforming soft clay into something as permanent as stone. For now, though, there's just the wheel's rhythm, the clay's cool response to her touch, and the comfortable weight of skill accumulated over years of practice. Her thoughts drift as she works, following paths as meandering as the Nile itself. She thinks about her daughter, married now and living in a village 2 days' walk upriver, wondering if her first grandchild will be born before the flood season. She thinks about the new glaze she's been experimenting with, made from crushed shells that turn a beautiful blue-green when fired at just the right temperature. The sun moves slowly across the sky, its angle shifting almost imperceptibly, painting new patterns of light and shadow across the workshop floor. Time moves differently here, measured not in precise increments, but in the rhythm of work, the cycle of seasons, the rise and fall of the great river that makes all life possible. There's no rushing toward some distant deadline, no frantic pursuit of arbitrary goals, just the steady accumulation of useful, beautiful things, made by patient hands, guided by knowledge, passed down through generations, like a sacred trust. And as the afternoon deepens toward evening, as shadows begin to lengthen, and the first hint of coolness touches the air, Enku continues her work with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows their place in the great pattern of existence, adding their own small thread to the tapestry of human civilization, one perfectly shaped vessel at a time. As Ra's chariot begins its descent toward the western horizon, the Nile transforms into a mirror of molten gold, its surface broken only by the gentle wake of fishing boats returning from their daily hunt. Let me tell you about Keti, whose weathered hands have guided red boats across these sacred waters for more than 20 years. Since he was barely old enough to hold a paddle without falling overboard, the evening is Keti's favorite time, when the brutal heat softens into something manageable, when the fish begin to move in the deeper channels, and when the river reveals its most generous secrets to those who know how to listen. His papyrus boat glides silently through water that reflects the sky so perfectly you might think you're sailing through clouds tinged with rose and gold. The craft beneath him is a marvel of ancient engineering, bundles of papyrus reeds bound together with such skill that they form a vessel both buoyant and flexible, able to ride the river's moods like a dancer following music. Tonight, Keti isn't alone on the water. His son, Amenemheb, 15 years old and eager to prove himself worthy of inheriting his father's knowledge, sits in the bow with a spear poised above the water's surface. The boy's muscles are tense with concentration, his young eyes scanning for the telltale shadows that might indicate fish moving in the shallows near the riverbank. The spear itself is a thing of beauty, a wooden shaft, straight as prayer, tipped with a bronze point sharp enough to pierce scales and flesh with surgical precision. Attached to the spear by a length of braided flax cord is a wooden float carved in the shape of a duck, painted with pigments that catch the evening light. When the spear finds its mark, the float will keep the weapon from sinking into the river's muddy bottom, allowing the fisherman to retrieve both spear and prey. There, Keti whispers, his voice barely disturbing the evening air. 2 handspans to the left of that lotus bloom, his eyes, sharpened by decades of reading the river's signs, have spotted what his son cannot yet see, the subtle disturbance in the water that speaks of fish feeding near the surface. Amenemheb adjusts his position, the boat rocking gently beneath his movement. The papyrus craft responds to his shifting weight like a living thing, its reeds creaking softly in what sounds almost like contentment. He draws back the spear, his arm muscles coiling like a snake, preparing to strike. And then swift as thought, he launches the weapon toward his target. The spear enters the water with barely a splash, and for a moment the evening holds its breath. Then the float bobs violently, signaling a successful strike, and Amenemhib lets out a whoop of joy that echoes across the water. Kedi smiles, remembering his own first successful catch, the pride that swelled in his chest like the river during flood season. Together they haul in their prize-a-fine Nile perch, its scales gleaming like silver coins in the fading light. The fish is nearly as long as a man's arm, thick-bodied and firm, with the sweet, clean taste that comes from living in the Nile's flowing waters rather than stagnant pools. It will feed Kedi's family tonight and provide trade goods for tomorrow's market, its flesh tender enough to satisfy even the most discerning palate. The successful catch marks the beginning of the evening's real work, as darkness creeps across the water like a gentle tide. Kedi guides his boat toward the reed beds that line the river's eastern shore. Here, where papyrus grows thick as a forest and the water moves slowly through countless hidden channels, the night fishers set their nets and wait for the river to fill them with silver treasure. The net itself is a masterpiece of ancient technology, made from flax fibers, twisted into cord, and then woven into a mesh fine enough to catch even young fish, but strong enough to hold a night's catch without breaking. Kedi's net has been in his family for 3 generations. Each tier carefully mended, each weak spot reinforced, until the original pattern is buried beneath layers of repairs that tell the story of countless nights spent wresting sustenance from the dark water setting. The net requires cooperation between father and son, their movements coordinated by years of practice and an understanding that goes deeper than words. Amenemhib takes one end to the far side of a narrow channel, while Kedi positions himself among the reeds on the opposite bank. The net stretches between them like a gossamer wall, nearly invisible in the growing darkness, waiting for unwary fish to swim into its embrace, while they wait for their trap to work its magic. Father and son share the simple meal that Kedi's wife packed for their evening expedition. There's bread, of course, the staff of life that appears at every Egyptian meal, but also dried dates stuffed with chopped almonds, their sweetness providing quick energy for the long night ahead. A small pot contains thick beer mixed with honey, the drink warming their bellies and loosening their tongues as the stars begin to appear overhead. The conversation flows as easily as the river current, touching on the mundane concerns of daily life and the larger mysteries that occupy human minds when darkness falls and the day's urgent business gives way to contemplation. Amenemheb asks about the old stories, the tales of gods and heroes that explain why the Nile floods each year, why the sun travels across the sky, why men must work and struggle and eventually return to the earth that gave them life. Kedi tells the story of Hapi, the god of the Nile's annual flood, whose embrace brings life to the narrow strip of green that makes Egypt possible. He speaks of Sobek, the crocodile god, who protects honest fishermen but punishes those who take more than their share from the river's bounty. And he tells of the great fish that swims in the deepest channels, the one that's said to carry the souls of dead pharaohs on their journey to the afterlife. Though whether this last tale is religion or superstition, even Kedi isn't entirely sure. The stories weave together with the sounds of night. Along the Nile, the gentle lap of water against reed stems, the distant call of night herons hunting in the shallows, the splash of a crocodile sliding from its muddy resting place into the river's embrace. Somewhere in the darkness, a hippopotamus snorts and grunts, reminding the fishermen that they share these waters with creatures whose power and unpredictability have earned them places in the pantheon of gods. As the night deepens, other boats appear on the water, dark silhouettes moving with purpose through channels known only to those who've spent their lives learning the river's secrets. Each boat carries its own crew of fishermen, each with their own techniques and preferred hunting grounds, but all united by the common bond of those who earn their living. From the Nile's generous but demanding embrace, the fishermen call to each other across the water, their voices carrying news and gossip from village to village. Someone upstream has caught a fish so large it took 4 men to lift it from the water. A trader from the south brings word of political troubles near the first cataract, where Nubian gold flows north in exchange for Egyptian grain and manufactured goods. A temple scribe has announced that the priest's calculations indicate an especially generous flood this year, news that brings smiles to faces hidden by darkness. Kedi listens to these exchanges with half his attention, while the other half remains focused on the subtle signs that indicate fish moving through his net, a slight tremor in the cord tied to his wrist, a change in the water's surface that suggests movement below are the signals he's learned to read like hieroglyphs written on the river's dark surface. When the moment comes, it arrives with the suddenness of lightning. The net cord jerks in Kedi's hand, and he signals to Amenemheb with a soft whistle. Together they begin hauling in their catch, the net growing heavy with struggling fish, their silver bodies flashing in the starlight as they fight against their capture. The night's work yields more than they dared hope, dozens of fish of various sizes, from finger-length specimens perfect for drying and storing to several large enough to grace a wealthy family's dinner table. They sort their catch by size and type, some destined for immediate consumption, others for trade, still others for the village's communal stores that help ensure no one goes hungry during the lean months before harvest. As the first pale hint of dawn begins to touch the eastern sky, Kedi guides his boat homeward through waters that seem to glow with their own inner light. The night's work is done, the fish are secured in woven baskets, and father and son share the quiet satisfaction of men who've earned their rest through honest labor under the watchful eyes of gods who appreciate skill, patience, and respect for the natural world that sustains all life. The village appears ahead of them like a cluster of sleeping giants, its mud brick houses dark and silent in the pre-dawn hush. Smoke rises from a few chimneys where early risers have begun their morning preparations, and the scent of baking bread drifts across the water like a welcoming embrace. Kedi beaches his boat on the familiar stretch of muddy shore where his father taught him to fish, and where, God's willing, he'll someday teach his own grandson the ancient arts of reading water, understanding fish, and working in harmony with the great river that makes all Egyptian life possible. The papyrus craft settles into the mud with a soft sigh, and father and son begin the familiar routine of securing their equipment and preparing their catch for the day's trading. The Nile flows past them in the growing light, its surface once again becoming the mirror that reflects not just the sky above, but the hopes and dreams of an entire civilization built on its banks, sustained by its generosity, and forever bound to its eternal rhythm of flood and recession, abundance and scarcity, life and death and renewal. In the pre-dawn darkness, while most of the village still sleeps, Merit the baker begins her daily communion with fire and flour. Her workshop stands apart from the other buildings, positioned downwind so that the smoke from her ovens won't trouble her neighbors, and close enough to the granary that carrying sacks of grain doesn't require a journey across the settlement. The building itself tells the story of her craft walls blackened by years of smoke, floors worn smooth by countless trips between kneading table and oven, and the sweet, yeasty aroma that seems to have soaked into the very mud bricks themselves. Merit learned the baker's art from her mother-in-law, a formidable woman who could judge an oven's temperature by holding her hand 6 inches from its mouth and counting slowly to 10. That knowledge passed to Merit like a sacred trust, along with the wooden paddles worn smooth by generations of use, the stone querns that reduce grain to flour with patient grinding, and the collection of ceramic vessels that hold the mysterious cultures of wild yeast, transform simple ingredients into the staff of life. The ovens themselves are marvels of ancient engineering, great beehive structures, built from Nile clay mixed with chopped straw, their walls thick enough to retain heat for hours after the fire dies down. Merit built these ovens with her own hands, guided by knowledge inherited from bakers stretching back to the earliest dynasties. When some nameless genius first discovered that grain cooked in an enclosed space rose higher and tasted better than the flat cakes baked on hot stones, this morning, as every morning for the past 15 years, Merit begins by coaxing life back into the banked coals that have smoldered through the night. She feeds them dried grass and small sticks, blowing gently until flames dance among the embers like tiny spirits celebrating the return of light. The fire grows under her careful attention, and soon the familiar warmth begins to drive away the night's chill. While the ovens heat, Merit turns to the day's first batch of dough, mixture prepared yesterday evening that has spent the night slowly fermenting in large pottery vessels. The wild yeasts, captured from the air and carefully nurtured in her mother-in-law's starter, have worked their magic, transforming simple flour and water into something alive, bubbling gently with the gases that will make bread rise and develop its complex, slightly sour flavor. The dough feels perfect under her hands, elastic and smooth, neither too wet nor too dry, with the slight tackiness that indicates the yeasts are active and healthy. Merit has kneaded enough dough in her lifetime to fill a pharaoh's tomb, her hands reading the mixture's texture like a scribe reads hieroglyphs. Too much water and the bread will be dense and gummy. Too little and it will emerge from the oven dry and crumbly, suitable only for soaking in beer or honey. She works by feel rather than measurement, adding flour when the dough seems too loose, working in small amounts of water when it threatens to become stiff and unmanageable. This is knowledge that can't be written down or memorized from scrolls. It lives in the hands and fingers, accumulated through years of practice and passed from one generation to the next through demonstration and patient correction. The bread Merit makes isn't uniform like modern loaves. Each piece emerges from her hands, slightly different from its neighbors, some round and flat like oversized coins, others shaped into long ovals, perfect for tearing and sharing. Still others formed into the complex braids and spirals that mark festival breads and offerings to the gods. The variety reflects both practical considerations and artistic impulse. Bread serving not just as nutrition, but as a canvas for creativity and religious expression. As the morning light grows stronger, filtering through the workshop's smoke-darkened doorway, Merit's first customers begin to arrive. These aren't commercial transactions in the modern sense. The village operates on a complex system of barter and mutual obligation that ensures everyone's needs are met, without the hard edges of pure capitalism. Ketty the fisherman brings part of last night's catch in exchange for the day's bread for his family. Anku the potter offers a new water jar in return for the special loaves needed for her daughter's wedding feast. The bread that emerges from Merit's ovens would surprise modern palates with its complexity and variety. The basic daily bread, made from emmer wheat and barley flour, has a nutty flavor and dense texture that provides steady energy for hard-working people. But Merit also creates specialty breads, some enriched with eggs from the ducks that paddle in the village pond, others sweetened with dates and honey, still others flavored with herbs and seeds that grow wild along the riverbank. There's bread shaped like animals for children's festivals, bread baked with amulets pressed into its surface for protection against evil spirits, and bread so fine and white it's reserved for offerings to the gods or the tables of wealthy officials who occasionally pass through the village on administrative business. Each type requires its own technique, its own timing, its own relationship between baker and oven that Merit has spent years perfecting. The work is hot and demanding, especially as the day progresses and the sun adds its heat to the oven's radiant warmth. Merit moves with the efficient grace of someone who's learned to conserve energy over the long hours of physical labor. Her movements economical but never hurried. Sweat beads on her forehead and runs in rivulets down her arms. But she continues working with the steady persistence that marks all successful craftspeople in this climate. Around midday, when the heat becomes almost unbearable, Merit takes a break from active baking to prepare for the afternoon's work. She sits in the small courtyard behind her workshop, where a sycamore fig tree provides blessed shade and a slight breeze carries the scent of the river. Her lunch is simple but satisfying bread from yesterday's baking, still soft and flavorful, spread with soft cheese made from goat's milk and drizzled with honey that tastes of the desert flowers where wild bees make their homes. While she eats, Merit's mind turns to the larger rhythms that govern her craft. The grain she uses comes from fields that flood and drain according to the Nile's ancient cycle, and the quality varies from year to year depending on weather, soil conditions, and the favor of the gods. Some harvests yield grain with high gluten content that makes bread rise tall and light. Others produce flour better suited to flatbreads and porridges that fill bellies without requiring the baker's most advanced skills. Merit has learned to adapt her techniques to work with whatever grain the village stores provide. In lean years, she stretches wheat flour with ground dates or figs, creating breads that taste sweet and rich despite their economical ingredients. When the Nile's flood brings particularly rich soil, the grain mills into flour so fine and white it seems to glow with inner light, and Merit reserves this premium ingredient for the most special occasions. The afternoon brings its own challenges as the ovens reach their peak temperature and the workshop becomes almost uninhabitable. For anyone not accustomed to working in extreme heat, Merit has developed techniques for managing this harsh environment. She works in short bursts, timing her movements to avoid the oven's direct radiance, and she keeps pottery vessels filled with water nearby for drinking and for cooling. Overheated tools, paddles, long-handled wooden tools used for sliding bread into the ovens and retrieving it when baked have been seasoned by years of use until they resist burning and carry just enough flour dust to prevent sticking. She wields these tools with the precision of a warrior handling weapons, sliding loaves into the oven's mouth with quick, confident movements that minimize heat loss and ensure even baking. The timing required for successful bread making operates on multiple scales simultaneously. Merit must track the progress of individual loaves as they transform from pale dough to golden brown perfection, while also managing the overall temperature of her ovens, the rising schedule of tomorrow's dough, and the complex social negotiations involved in serving a community where bread represents far more than simple sustenance. As the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, Merit's workshop fills with the incomparable aroma of fresh bread, a scent that seems to capture the essence of human civilization itself. The loaves emerge from the ovens with crusts that crack and sing as they cool, their interiors soft and riddled with the holes created by yeast's patient work throughout the night and morning. Children gather in the workshop's doorway, drawn by scents that make their mouths water and their stomachs growl with anticipation. Merit always sets aside a few small loaves for these young visitors, understanding that today's children are tomorrow's customers, and that the memory of warm bread given freely creates bonds that lasts lifetimes. The day's work concludes with the careful banking of coals for tomorrow's fire and the preparation of fresh dough that will ferment overnight in covered vessels. Merit cleans her tools with the methodical care of someone who understands that good equipment, properly maintained, can last for generations. Her wooden paddles receive a light coating of oil to prevent cracking. Her stone surfaces are swept clean of flour and debris, and her ceramic vessels are washed and dried before being stored in their appointed places. As darkness falls over the village, Merit finally allows herself to rest, sitting in her courtyard with a cup of beer and a piece of bread that represents the culmination of a day's honest labor. The bread tastes of grain blessed by the sun, water drawn from the sacred Nile, and the patient skill of human hands, guided by knowledge as old as civilization itself. In every bite lies the story of humanity's greatest invention, the discovery that raw ingredients, properly combined and transformed by fire, can become something greater than the sum of their parts, something that nourishes not just the body, but the soul, binding communities together with the simple, powerful act of breaking bread and sharing the bounty of the earth. In a corner of the village, where the morning light filters through carefully positioned windows, Torit sits at her loom with the concentrated patience of someone practicing an art that measures time not in minutes but in slow accumulation of threads transformed into fabric. Her workshop is a sanctuary of organized complexity, vertical looms standing like wooden harps against the walls, baskets overflowing with flax in various stages of preparation, and spindles by the dozens, each one balanced to perfection for turning raw fiber into thread strong enough to outlast the hands that created it. Toret learned her craft as a child, sitting at her grandmother's feet while aged fingers demonstrated the mysteries of turning plants into clothing. The process begins not with thread, but with flax, the tall, blue-flowered plants that grow in carefully tended plots near the river. Their stems harvested when the morning dew still clings to their leaves, and the plants' fibers have reached perfect maturity. The transformation from plant to linen requires patience that would challenge modern minds, accustomed to instant gratification. First comes the retting bundles of flax stems, soaked in stagnant pools until bacterial/action loosens the fibers from their woody cores. The smell of retting flax is unforgettably earthy and slightly sweet, like decomposing vegetation mixed with the green scent of river water. Toret learned as a child to judge the process by scent alone, knowing exactly when the stems have softened enough for the next stage without allowing them to rot beyond usefulness. After retting comes the breaking, placing the dried flax stems across wooden boards studded with sharp blades, then striking them with heavy wooden knives to shatter the brittle cores and release the precious fibers within. This work requires rhythm and technique, each blow precisely placed to break the wood without damaging the delicate threads that will eventually become fine linen. The sound echoes across the village during flax season, rhythmic hammering that speaks of autumn's approach and the community's preparation for another year of textile production. Today, Toret works with flax that completed its transformation months ago, the finest fibers combed and sorted into grades that determine their ultimate use. The thread she spins from these fibers ranges from coarse, sturdy cord suitable for ropes and rough work clothing to gossamer strands fine enough for the sheer linen that wealthy women wear to temple ceremonies. Each grade requires its own technique, its own relationship between spinner and spindle that Toret has mastered through decades of practice. The loom before her holds a nearly completed piece of fabric destined for the household of Imhotep, the village's most prosperous farmer. The cloth emerging from her careful work is neither the coarse hemp of peasant clothing nor the impossibly fine royal linen displayed in tomb paintings, but something between, sturdy enough for daily wear yet soft and smooth enough to feel pleasant against skin. The natural color of well-processed flax is a warm cream that seems to glow with captured sunlight, but this particular piece will be dyed with indigo, traded from merchants who travel the river routes, connecting Egypt to the mysterious lands beyond the cataracts. Toret's hands move with unconscious skill as she works, her fingers feeling for broken threads or irregularities in tension that could mar the finished fabric's appearance. The loom itself is a marvel of simple engineering vertical posts supporting horizontal bars that create the framework for interlacing warp and weft threads. No nails or metal fasteners hold it together. Instead, wooden pegs and leather bindings create a structure both strong and flexible, able to maintain proper tension while allowing for the slight movements that keep threads from snapping under stress. The sound of weaving creates its own music thump of the beater bar packing weft threads tightly together, the gentle whisper of the shuttle carrying thread back and forth across the warp, and the subtle creak of wooden parts moving against each other in the ancient dance of textile creation. This rhythm becomes hypnotic, allowing Torit's mind to wander while her hands continue their skilled work. Automatically, she thinks about her daughter, Nefertiti, married now to a potter in a village 3 days' journey upstream, wondering if her first grandchild will inherit the weaver's patient temperament or prefer the more immediate satisfactions of working with clay. She considers the complex social dynamics of village life, who owes whom favors, which families are rising in prosperity, whose children show promise as future craftspeople, worthy of training in the specialized skills that keep civilization functioning. The afternoon heat drives most outdoor activity into shaded retreats, but Torit's workshop remains relatively cool thanks to its northern exposure and the thermal mass of thick mud brick walls. Still, she pauses occasionally to drink from the pottery vessel that sits beside her loom, the water flavored with mint leaves that float on its surface like tiny green boats. The drink refreshes without filling her stomach, an important consideration for someone who must maintain steady concentration throughout the long working day. Other women join Torit as the afternoon progresses, bringing their own projects and creating an informal gathering that serves social functions as important as the textile work itself. Hennemeyer, the wife of a fisherman, works at preparing fresh flax fibers, her hands moving in the practiced motions that separate usable thread from waste material. Anchisenamen spins thread from prepared fibers, her spindle dancing between her fingers as she draws out strands of remarkable evenness and strength. The conversation flows as naturally as the Nile's current, touching on family news, village gossip, and the larger concerns that affect everyone's daily life. Someone has heard that the provincial governor plans to visit during the next month, bringing opportunities for selling fine textiles, but also the burden of additional taxes. A trader from the south reports that Nubian gold is flowing freely this season, meaning increased demand for luxury goods among the wealthy officials, who profit from the trade. The women share techniques and troubleshoot problems with the generous spirit of artisans who understand that knowledge shared freely returns benefits to the entire community. A young bride struggling with her first attempt at fine weaving receives patient instruction in adjusting loom tension. An experienced spinner demonstrates a new technique for achieving perfectly even thread thickness. These informal workshops preserve and transmit skills that represent thousands of years of accumulated human knowledge. Each small improvement carefully tested and gradually incorporated into the collective wisdom of the craft. As the sun moves lower in the sky, the quality of light in the workshop changes, becoming warmer and more golden, perfect for the detailed work of checking finished sections for flaws or irregularities. Tourette examines her day's progress with the critical eye of someone whose reputation depends on consistent quality. The fabric emerging from her loom shows the hallmarks of master craftsmanship, threads so evenly spaced they seem to follow invisible guidelines. Tension so perfectly maintained that the cloth will drape properly when cut and sewn into garments. The linen she creates will outlast almost everything else produced in the village. While wooden tools decay, pottery breaks, and even stone monuments eventually crumble, properly made linen cloth can survive for millennia under the right conditions. Archaeologists have found Egyptian textiles preserved in desert tombs that still retain their original color and flexibility after 4,000 years. Testimony to the skill of weavers, whose names are lost but whose artistry speaks across the centuries. But Tourette doesn't work for posterity. She works for the immediate needs of her community and her family. The cloth currently taking shape on her loom will become tunics for Imhotep's household, providing comfort and protection against sun and wind for people who measure their lives in seasons rather than years. Other pieces from her workshop will serve as trade goods, exchanged for metal tools, exotic spices, or the fine pottery that makes daily life more pleasant and efficient. The economic value of her work extends far beyond simple utility. Fine linen serves as a form of portable wealth, easily stored and transported, always in demand throughout the ancient world. A bolt of Tourette's best work might purchase a month's supply of grain for a family, or serve as bride price in marriage negotiations, or provide the means for a young man to buy his way into a craft guild in one of the great cities along the river. As evening approaches and the workshop grows too dark for detailed work, Tourette carefully secures her loom for the night, protecting the day's progress from dust, insects, and the curious investigation of village cats who find thread irresistibly attractive. Her tools receive the same careful attention: shuttles, cleaned and oiled, beater bars, checked for damage, spindles organized according to their specific purposes and carefully stored, where they won't be damaged by accident. The transition from work to rest happens gradually, marked not by bells or whistles, but by the natural rhythm of daylight fading into dusk. Tourette joins her husband for the evening meal, her hands still carrying the subtle stiffness that comes from a full day of precise, repetitive motion. They eat in comfortable silence, sharing bread and beer while the village settles into its nighttime routine around them later. As darkness deepens and the first stars appear above the Nile's flowing waters, Tourette sits in her courtyard with a piece of simple mending a tunic belonging to her youngest son that has developed a small tear near the shoulder seam. The repair work requires different skills than creating new fabric, demanding the ability to match existing patterns while reinforcing weak areas without creating unsightly patches. Her needle moves through the cloth with the same unconscious precision that guides her work at the loom, each stitch placed exactly where it will do the most good while remaining nearly invisible to casual observation. This is the hidden work of textile arts, not the dramatic creation of new fabrics, but the patient maintenance and repair that keeps existing clothing serviceable year after year, extending its useful life and delaying the need for expensive replacements. The stars wheel slowly overhead as Tourette completes her mending, her work illuminated by the soft glow of an oil lamp that burns with the steady flame of olive oil pressed in temple groves far to the north. The finished repair is invisible in the lamp's gentle light, a perfect example of skill applied to preservation rather than creation, ensuring that tomorrow her son will have clothing that fits properly and shows no signs of wear, despite the daily stresses of childhood in an agricultural village, as she prepares for sleep. Torit's last thoughts turn to tomorrow's work, the progress she hopes to make on Imhotep's commission, the new piece she wants to begin once the current fabric is complete, and the subtle adjustments to loom tension that might improve the evenness of her weave. These are the concerns that occupy the minds of craftspeople in every age, the satisfaction of work well done, measured against the endless pressure to meet deadlines and exceed expectations. The night settles over the village like a soft blanket, and Torit sleeps the deep sleep of someone whose hands have spent the day in useful work, whose skills serve her community's needs, and whose art connects her to an unbroken chain of knowledge stretching back to the first human who discovered that plant fibers, properly prepared and interwoven, could provide protection, comfort, and beauty that enriches life in ways both practical and spiritual. As the last golden light fades from the western sky and the first stars pierce the deepening indigo above the Nile, the village transforms into something altogether different from its daytime self. The harsh realities of labor and survival soften into the gentler realm of reflection, storytelling, and preparation for the mysterious journey that sleep represents. In Egyptian understanding, a nightly death and rebirth that mirrors the sun, God's passage through the underworld has returned from his fields, his body tired but satisfied with the day's progress. The irrigation channels flow smoothly, the young barley shows healthy green shoots, and tomorrow's work lies clearly mapped in his mind like a familiar path. He washes away the day's dust and sweat with water drawn cool from the family's storage jar, feeling the liquids, blessing as it runs across skin bronzed by countless hours under Ra's attention. The evening meal brings the family together around their simple tabbouleh low wooden platform, worn smooth by years of use, surrounded by reed mats that provide comfortable seating on the packed earth floor. Tonight's food represents the village's communal prosperity. Bread still warm from Marit's ovens, fish that Keti caught in yesterday's nets, beer brewed from barley that grew in last season's flood-enriched soil, and vegetables from the small garden that Kemwasset's wife tends with the same careful attention she gives to their children. The bread tears cleanly in Kemwasset's hands, releasing steam that carries the yeasty aroma of fermentation and the nutty sweetness of properly milled grain. He dips each piece in olive oil pressed from trees that grow in temple groves, the golden liquid flavored with herbs that someone, perhaps Marit's daughter, gathered from the wild spaces between cultivated fields and deserts, edge, its flesh white and tender, seasoned with salt that traveled by caravan from the Great Lakes far to the south, and onions that grow in every village garden. Each bite carries the clean taste of flowing water, the Nile's gift transformed by Keti's skill into sustenance for families who never see the river's deeper channels, where the largest fish swim as they eat. Kemwasset's children Listen with the absorbed attention that marks the young when adults share knowledge that will shape their understanding of the world. Tonight's lesson concerns the stars now appearing overhead. Not abstract astronomy, but practical knowledge that every farmer must master: two-time plantings, predict floods, and navigate the complex calendar that governs agricultural and religious life. "See there," Kamwasit says, pointing toward a bright star rising above the eastern horizon. "That's Sopt Sirius, the herald of the flood. When she appears just before dawn, we know that Happy is stirring in his cavern beneath the first cataract, preparing to send the sacred waters that renew our land." His oldest son, 12-year-old Sinam, follows his father's gaze with eyes that already show the farmer's instinct for reading natural signs. "How long from her rising to the flood's arrival, father? Count the days on your fingers." The priests in their temples track this cycle with instruments carved from stone and metal. But we farmers read it in the sky itself. As our fathers taught us, and their fathers before them, the conversation flows naturally from celestial mechanics to family history, each star serving as anchor for memories that connect the present generation to ancestors, whose bones rest in modest tombs beyond the village limits. Kamwasit tells of his grandfather's great triumph, the year he correctly predicted an unusually high flood and convinced his neighbors to build their granaries on higher ground, saving the community's seed grain when lesser settlements lost their stores to unexpected waters. As full darkness settles over the village, families retreat to the courtyards and rooftops, where the day's accumulated heat slowly dissipates into the clear night air. Children who spent the afternoon in whatever shade they could find now run freely through streets, lit by oil lamps and the brilliant stars that shine with desert clarity through the atmosphere unpolluted by anything more than cooking smoke and the occasional torch carried by late travelers. Anku, the potter, sits on her rooftop with her elderly mother, sharing the comfortable silence of women who've learned that conversation need not be constant to be meaningful. Below them, the workshop kiln glows like a small volcano, its carefully banked fire maintaining the steady temperature needed to transform today's shaped clay into tomorrow's finished pottery. The transformation happening in that controlled inferno represents one of humanity's most important discoveries: the ability to create permanent containers from common earth, vessels that can hold water, store grain, and preserve the surplus that makes civilization possible. The night air carries sounds that tell stories of their own: the gentle splash of late fishermen working the moonlit shallows, the distant drumming from a wedding celebration in the next village, the soft conversation of families gathering to share the day's experiences and plan tomorrow's activities. These sounds weave together into a symphony of human contentment that speaks of a community in harmony with itself and its environment. Merit. The baker uses these evening hours for preparation that will make tomorrow's work possible. She checks the wild yeast cultures that give her bread its distinctive flavor, stirring the thick, sweet-smelling mixtures that bubble gently in their ceramic containers. These living organisms represent her most valuable possessions, some inherited from her mother-in-law, others captured from the air during particularly favorable seasons, when wild yeasts seem to dance on every breeze. The process of maintaining these cultures requires constant attention and deep understanding. Too warm and they ferment too rapidly, producing alcohol instead of the gases that make bread rise. Too cool and they fall dormant, requiring patient coaxing back to active life. Merit has learned to read their needs like a mother interpreting her child's moods, adjusting their food and environment to keep them healthy and productive through seasons of feast and famine. In her workshop, Torit, the weaver, uses lamplight to examine the day's progress on her loom, checking for irregularities that are easier to spot in the concentrated illumination of burning oil than in daylight's diffused glow. Her fingers trace the emerging pattern in the fabric, feeling for variations in tension or alignment that could mar the finished cloth's appearance. This detailed inspection represents the difference between merely adequate work and the excellence that builds reputation and commands premium prices in village trade networks. The lamp's flickering flame creates moving shadows that seem to bring the loom to life, its wooden frame appearing almost animate in the shifting light. Torit has worked by lamplight often enough to know its tricks, how shadows can hide flaws or make perfect work appear defective, how the quality of oil affects both brightness and steadiness of illumination. Tonight's oil burns cleanly, producing the steady golden glow that allows for accurate work without eye strain. Across the village, families gather around their own small lights to share the stories that preserve cultural knowledge and bind communities together across generations. These aren't formal recitations from written texts. Few villagers can read the hieroglyphs that decorate temple walls and official documents, but living oral traditions that adapt and evolve while maintaining their essential truths. Old Senub, scribe, serves as the village's unofficial keeper of stories, his phenomenal memory preserving not just the proper forms of letters and official documents, but also the myths and legends that explain why the world works as it does. Tonight, he tells the story of Nut, the sky goddess, whose star-spangled body arches over the earth, swallowing the sun each evening and giving birth to it again each dawn. See how her arms and legs touch the horizon at the 4 cardinal points, he says, his weathered hands sketching the goddess's form against the star-filled sky. And there, where the Milky Way flows across her belly, that's the celestial Nile, where the souls of the righteous sail with Ra through the hours of darkness, defending his solar boat against the serpent Apophis, devour light itself, and return the world. Primordial chaos. The children listen with the fascination that myths inspire in young minds struggling to understand their place in a vast and often mysterious universe. These stories serve multiple functions: entertainment during long evenings, moral instruction disguised as adventure tales, and practical astronomy lessons that teach navigation and calendar keeping through memorable narratives about gods and heroes whose actions play out nightly across the heavens. As the night deepens and children grow sleepy despite their fascination with adult stories, families begin the gentle transition toward rest. Sleeping arrangements in ancient Egyptian homes reflect both practical considerations and social structures, parents sharing reed mats in the main room, children clustered together for warmth and security, valuable possessions stored where they can be protected but remain accessible for early morning work. The beds themselves would seem strange to modern sensibilities: wooden frames supporting tightly woven reed mattresses, that provide firm but comfortable support. Pillows are luxury items, carved from wood or stone, and used only by the wealthy. Most villagers make do with folded clothing or small cushions stuffed with duck feathers. Linen sheets, when available, are treasures to be preserved and mended rather than replaced, their smooth coolness providing relief from the climate's persistent heat. Camwaset performs the small ritual that ends each day, a brief prayer of gratitude to the household gods whose wooden statues watch over his family from their niche in the wall. These aren't the great deities whose temples dominate the cities, but humbler spirits who concern themselves with daily survival. Base, the dwarf god who protects children and brings laughter. Tauret, the hippo goddess who watches over pregnant women and childbirth. And the ancestors whose memories deserve honor and whose wisdom guides their descendants through life's challenges. The prayer is simple, heartfelt, and private, a moment of connection between mortal and divine that requires no priests or formal ceremonies. Protect my family through the night's dangers, grant us health for tomorrow's labors, and let the Nile's blessing continue to flow through our fields and our lives. These words, or variations of them, rise from homes throughout the village as families prepare to surrender consciousness to the mysterious realm of dreams and divine visitation. Sleep comes gradually in the ancient world, unmarked by the abrupt transition from artificial light to darkness that characterizes modern bed. Oil lamps burn lower as their fuel is consumed, their flames growing smaller and more golden until they finally gutter out, leaving only the stars and moon to illuminate the sleeping village. The transition feels natural, following rhythms established long before humans learned to extend daylight with burning oil in the darkness. The village doesn't fall completely silent. Night sounds create their own gentle symphony, the distant call of owls hunting in the grain fields, the soft rustle of palm fronds stirring in the river breeze, the contented snoring of men and women exhausted by honest labor. These sounds blend into a lullaby that speaks of security, community, and the eternal rhythms that connect human life to the larger patterns of earth and sky. Dreams, when they come, carry messages from the gods and glimpses of the future that wise men learn to interpret as guidance for waking decisions. Camwaset dreams of green fields stretching endlessly beside flowing water, of grain so abundant that storage becomes a pleasant problem, of children grown to successful adulthood, grandchildren learning the ancient skills that connect humanity to the land that sustains all life. The night passes in gentle stages marked by the stars' slow wheel. Across Nut's celestial body, Mars moves through his appointed course. Venus prepares for her role as herald of dawn, and the moon, sometimes full and bright, sometimes a mere crescent, sometimes absent entirely, marks the passage of months with the same reliability that the sun marks days and the Nile's flood marks years. As the darkest hour approaches, just before the first pale hint of dawn touches the eastern sky, the village rests in the perfect stillness that comes only in those moments when day and night balance on the edge of transition. This is the time when the veil between worlds grows thin, when gods walk among sleeping mortals, and when dreams carry their clearest messages about the day to come and the choices that will shape the future. Soon, very soon, the cycle will begin again, with the first cock's crow, the first stirring of early risers, the first wisps of smoke from cooking fires being coaxed back to life. Merit will begin her daily communion with bread and ovens. Kedi will prepare his nets for another night's fishing, and Kemwaset will return to fields that depend on his knowledge and labor for their productivity. But for now, in these precious hours, when work ceases and the body repairs itself through rest, the village sleeps peacefully under stars that have watched over the Nile's green corridor since the first humans learned to plant grain and build homes and create the communities that transform survival into civilization. May these memories of ancient peace guide you into your own restful dreams, where the gentle sounds of the eternal river flow through consciousness like a blessing, carrying away the day's concerns and preparing your spirit for whatever tomorrow may bring. And so our journey along the sacred Nile comes to its gentle close, friends. We've walked with farmers and bakers, potters and weavers, fishermen and storytellers, sharing their simple days and peaceful nights in a world where time moved like honey and life flowed as steadily as the great river that made everything possible. May these memories of ancient contentment settle into your dreams like Nile silt enriching ready fields. If you've drifted off during our time together, let me know in the comments below how these stories served your rest. I love hearing which moments carried you most gently toward sleep. Until we meet again beside history's quiet waters. Sweet dreams, dear travelers. Sweet dreams.